Hi, my name's Phil Dye, and I host the Marking the Role podcast for Australian teachers and filtered the podcast on social issues. I'm an ex-teacher, a past educator at UNSW, and in my early life, I was a lecturer in media and communication at UTS. So I'm passionate about honest news reporting. I went to the Rainbow Storytime at Thirroul Library on Saturday, the 24th of June, and as the host of a local podcast, I was given permission from Wollongong City Council to attend. Thank you to Wollongong City Council. I'll spend time towards the end of this short video telling you about the Rainbow Storytime with Miss Roxy, but before that, I wanted to talk about the ABC coverage of the event that said that supporters rallied against far-right activists. I'm afraid the truth is quite different. I first went to interview those protesting about the event, the so-called far-right activists. Yes, one small group were dressed in black and wore face masks. And I asked them why, and they said they didn't want to be doxed or outed, and I suggested they change the colours as it made them look bad. They looked at one another and agreed. They were mainly articulate young men who was certainly not abusive. There was one guy in black who was agitated, pacing about and waving an Australian flag. He looked unwell. The others were fine. As well as these, there were older women knitting, middle-aged women chatting, and several older men standing around having a coffee. And they were certainly not right-wing activists, and they were in the majority. The ABC didn't mention them. No one on their side of the road swore at me, pushed me, or yelled at me. They were mostly parents and grandparents. The ABC quoted the words on their placards, which said, "Inclusion does not equate to child gender confusion, and don't drag kids into this." As if these perfectly reasonable and non-abusive words were hate words. Get real, ABC, you have to get out more. Here's what a few of them said, including one of the young men in black.
I think it is being pushed into our faces from a darker space, and there's a lot of confusion going around, and it really should not be involving children.
And to make this the norm can put every child in danger throughout our society.
It's confusing children. I actually work in education. I don't care about, men sleeping with men or whatever, but just leave the kids alone, basically. End of story.
Yeah, let them be children, and what's happening is an utter disgrace.
The ABC said the protesters declined to comment. Well, they talked to me. I then crossed to where the rainbow and trans flags were in order to get to the library. There were far more people with masks and balaclavas on in the rainbow group than the so-called far-right types. Of course, this wasn't mentioned by the ABC either. I also wanted to get comments from them on the way through, and this proved impossible. I was pushed and shoved, mainly by a group of young women who tried to grab my phone. I found this strange, as I could have been there to support them. They didn't know who I was. I was simply old, male, and not waving a flag or wearing a badge. These young women yelled whenever I tried to ask someone a question, so interviewing was impossible. I had flags and coats thrown over me to stop my progress, which it did. I couldn't see. A police officer came to my aid and asked who I was, and I showed him my council pass, and this made the young women even more angry. They became more physical, agitated, shoving and blocking my way. They were far more agitated and unpredictable than the man in black with the flag on the other side of the road.
Sounds very...
Pardon? A second policeman then came to help. I was ushered in and told by the council officer to stand in one place. I couldn't film and I couldn't record, although other parents were filming. The one photo of Miss Roxy here is provided by a parent. But what was it like? There were 27 adults, mostly mums with a few dads. There were 32 children, Most of the kids were under 4 years old. There were 3 babies. Most of the mums and dads were probably there to be kind and inclusive. I guessed they didn't know about the gender crisis in schools. Their kids were too young. A few, though, were pretty hardcore trans types who were there more for the ideology than the story time, and I pitied their kids. Miss Roxy was good. He didn't evangelise with trans ideology. He simply read 3 books and sang a few songs, and the books weren't indoctrination. To be fair, Miss Roxy was just doing his job, a job where he was probably paid very well, between $700 and $2,000 for his 40 minutes work, I'm told. A good lurk. Any anger should not be directed at him. Any anger, and certainly lots of questions, should be directed at the community service team at Wollongong City Council for putting on an event that didn't unite but divided the community. They booked Miss Roxy in the name of ideology. That's all it was. It was flag waving. The councillors who endorsed this, those who have no social antenna whatsoever, also need to rethink their position. Are you there for the people or to flog your beliefs? To have such a divisive event that I propose does not have the majority support of the community is an insult to ratepayers. It's especially an insult as the police officers, riot police, council staff and cleaners would have cost taxpayers thousands. The local police were terrific. To be fair to the region, the community services team should organise pensioner story time, doctor story time, war veteran story time and Muslim story time. The number of children with gender dysphoria has risen 20-fold. Gender clinics around the world are being shut down. Girls who had hormones and their breasts removed at age 16 are now suing doctors for medical malpractice. Shouldn't council officers have thought a little more before waving the flag? I also thought ABC, funded by taxpayers, could have put aside ideology to report the full story. As someone who has written for the ABC, I'm horrified at what I'm now seeing. My name is Phil Dye. Just search for Marking the Role or Filtered the Podcast on whatever streaming service you use. Thanks for watching.